Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at the Spilimbergo Open, which is being held in the country of Italy. Now, the reason we're talking about this tournament is the famous YouTuber and international master Levi Rozman is playing this tournament. It is a 9-round classical chess tournament being played over the next 6 days with a time control of 90 minutes and 30-second increment for move 1. Now, whether Levi can make a norm or not is kind of unclear because the tournament is very imbalanced. You have a couple of very strong GMs. You have some IMs like Levi, and then you have some players who are much lower rated, so it's unclear whether he can actually make a grandmaster norm, but nonetheless it is an opportunity to play and try to gain some experience and ranking points as well. So let's jump right into the action. The first round, we have Levi playing with the white piece against Simone Giulio from Italy, who is rated 2116, and Levi is back at 2370. All right, so the game starts with the move knight to f3. From Levi, we get the move b6, and now Levi plays the move c4. One thing that I would caution is when you're playing players who are significantly lower rated than you are, and they're not, say, young, talented, rising junior players specifically, or you're not at the grandmaster level, which pretty much comprises 99.99% of chess players. If you're playing someone much lower rated, it's very important you try to play stable openings, nothing too crazy, because in general, the quality of your play over the course of the game should show, and also the opening preparation in theory shouldn't be as good in terms of the knowledge base that your opponent has. So we get c4. Levi's opponent plays c5. Now keep in mind, I just want to make one point here. If I were playing here, I would actually just play e4, bishop b7, and knight c3 followed by d4. But Levi is staying true to the player that he is, and he's sticking within his systems. So we get c4, c5. Levi plays knight c3. We got bishop to b7, and now he plays the move e3. Here white has two choices. Either you can play e3 or g3. If you go g3, you're trying to fianchetto the bishop to g2, and if you play e3, you're going to move the bishop to e2 or d3, depending on what happens after you push the pawn to d4. So we get the move e6. Levi plays the move d4. We get pawn takes pawn, and now we have the move bishop b4. Levi plays bishop to d3 here, and now we get the move bishop takes knight on c3. Now this is a little bit premature to take the knight on c3 here. Black should probably play knight to f6, castles, and then make the decision whether to take the knight, whether to play d5, or try to develop the knight to c6. But again, Levi's opponent is significantly lower rated than him, more than 250 points in fact, so his opponent is probably not going to be super precise. So we get bishop takes knight, pawn takes bishop. We get to move queen to c7. This is already a slight mistake from Levi's opponent. Black should probably still develop the knight either to f6 or e7 here, followed by castling the king. So we get queen c7. Levi castles, and now his opponent plays the move d6 here, trying to move the knight to d7 potentially. Levi goes rook to e1, and now we get the move knight to f6. And here Levi correctly plays this move d5. Now, the reason this move is so strong is that in this position, there's a lot of pressure towards the pawn on e6. If black were to castle, you can play this move knight to d4, further putting pressure on the pawn on e6. And this is actually very likely to transpose to the game. If black were to take the pawn on d5 here, white can go bishop g5, d takes c4, and after takes, queen g4, g6, and knight to f5. White has a crushing attack here on the king's side. The king on g8 is super weak. Black has all these pieces, this little box, which are simply not developed in the game. So very, very strong move from Levi. His opponent plays the move e5 here correctly. We get knight d4 anyway, and now Levi's opponent decides to castle the king. Now black here is already in a lot of trouble, but the best try would probably be to play knight b to d7 here, because after knight b5, queen b8, and bishop to a3, trying to target this pawn on d6, black can play knight c5 here. After f4, white is still much better, but at least you're not losing on the spot. So after knight to d4, Levi's opponent decides to castle here, and now Levi plays this move knight to b5, attacking the queen, and black is in a ton of trouble here, because if you move the queen to c5 here, there's bishop to a3, you attack the queen goes back, you take the pawn, trade the knight for the bishop, take the rook here, and probably just rook takes e5, knight d7, and rook e1 should be winning for white. You have two extra central pawns and a rook in return for the knight. It's simply too much power. So Levi's opponent here decides to play the move queen to d7, and now Levi plays the move f4. Now this move, as you'll notice from the evaluation bar, is considered a quote-unquote blunder. I don't really fault Levi for playing it. The line that the computer prefers is bishop to a3 here, because there's no knight coming to c5, which is exactly why moving that knight to d7 was so crucial earlier. And after knight to e8, now playing the move f4, because after black takes what looks like a free pawn, now you can play moves like queen h5, g6, and queen h6. All these pawns are very, very weak here on f4 and d6. I think the computer wants something better, which is queen h4. Oh, and that's because here you have rook e7 as well. So not only do you attack the pawn on f4 and then the pawn on d6 here, but you also have the third threat of rook e7 creating the kebab, and white is very close to winning. I'll show one sample line because it's kind of cool, which is black plays a6 here. You go rook e7, let's just say queen to c8, and now you can play this move bishop takes g6. Actually, not bishop takes g6. Sorry, I'm blind. A little bit early for me. I think you just take, and you win the game. Actually, what I thought was winning was takes, but after h takes g6, black is actually simply up a piece here. A little bit early. Maybe I should drink some coffee before my match with Nepo in a short while. So computer likes bishop a3 more, but Levy instead plays f4, and this is the last moment where black has a slight glimmer of hope, which is to play e4, sacking a pawn, because keep in mind that in this position white has double pawns on c3 and c4. So even though in this position white is up one pawn, these pawns on c3 and c4 are quite weak. Now after takes, probably what black should play here is knight to, not bishop a6, sorry, is knight to a6 here, and after bishop a3, knight c5, takes, and white is only up a pawn here, probably after queen to e2 with the idea of rook a e1 and the legendary triple stack. White should be very close to winning in the long term, but at least you're not losing on the spot. Instead, Levy's opponent decides here to play the move a6, and this simply loses the game on the spot, as Levy can sack the knight for the pawn on d6, get this move queen takes knight, and now you have pawn takes pawn on e5. And here white is temporarily down a knight, but you have the pawn guarded by the rook, which is forking the queen and the knight. Levy's opponent plays queen c5, checking the king, and now Levy correctly plays the move bishop to e3. If white were to move the king away here, white is still actually much better, but black can at least try to survive here by sacking the knight back, and now we have even material. But Levy goes bishop e3, the rook guards the bishop attacks the queen, and now the pawn is still going to capture this knight on f6. Levy's opponent plays the move queen a3 here, and apparently he resigns immediately. Now I don't know exactly what happened, whether he played queen a3 and simply missed e takes f6 and resign, or he just I really don't know what happened. Levy can obviously explain it as well, but at this point white is winning no matter what black does. The best move would be to go queen e7, takes, and now white gets a double wooden shield here with the bishops on d4 and d3, which are spying both of the diagonals. And after a move like queen to h6 here, white can go rook to e3, going for the rook lift to either the h3 or g3 squares, and with this double wooden shield combined with the rook, white is simply winning immediately. So Levy's opponent plays queen a3 and resigns. The way the game probably would have concluded is e takes f6. If black takes the pawn on c3, one of the last tries, white has many ways to win. I see what the top computer line is, which is to sack a bishop on h7. I don't really think that would happen in a human game. Probably Levy would simply take on g7 and play a move like queen to h5, followed by bishop to h6 here, and with the bishops and the queen, white is just winning the game. So Levy's opponent resigns the game here. This means that Levy gets a very, very nice and smooth 17 move victory in round number 1 with the white pieces. Now, since this game is so short, I'll just talk about some general things, which is people should realize that the differentials in rating levels is very, very critical here. So one thing that a lot of people might be wondering is you see games like this and you see a 250 point rating difference between Levy and his opponent. You're thinking, well, Hikaru, why don't you go and play games against like 2,500 GMs in these random open tournaments? Random, I shouldn't say, because that slightly diminishes it. But in these open tournaments, why not play these open tournaments, play against 2,500s, just beat them and gain a lot of rating points? Now, the most important point is that there's really a big scale in terms of the differential, which is that when I play against a GM who's 2550, it is much harder for me to win a game because the advantages that I have are smaller across the board. I'm better in all phases of the game, but if you look at the opening phase, middle game, and end game, the advantages are very minute. So if I play 2550 and they can survive the opening, for example, that's already one of the big advantages that I have that has been neutralized, and I can't rely on them making a serious blunder to lose the game. Whereas at the level that Levy's at, if he's 2370, 2400, let's just say 2400 playing against a 2150 to use a 250 point differential, Levy's opponents, they're much worse in all facets of the game, meaning that even if you don't get an advantage out of the opening, even if they survive that phase, they are going to struggle later on. They'll probably make a mistake in the middle game or in the end game. They just simply aren't as well rounded. So because of that, the differential is completely different at the level Levy's playing at. And I just want to point that out for people who probably wonder, well, and why don't I just go and try to do the same thing? The difference is much smaller between a 2800 and a 2550 than it is between a 2400 level player and a 2150 player. So if Levy plays these lower rated players and he doesn't get in trouble in the opening, he's able to survive, he should beat players this level, I would say, with 90% or greater, I was going to say accuracy, but he should win 90% of the time or more. At any rate, very, very smooth one for Levy in round number 1 in the the Spillim Burgo Open. Sorry, I'm getting a little bit tongue tied there. Huge one for Levy in the first round. He's going to play someone a little bit better in the second round, but he's off to a good start in this tournament. Hopefully by the end he'll start playing 2,500 players. I believe the top seed in this event is the Belgian GM Daniel Darda, who I think is rated somewhere around 2,600. So there is some potential for Levy to play against some big GMs, get some scalps, and continue on the path towards becoming a GM. All right, you guys, so on that note, I know the game was pretty light. It's the first round, Levy playing someone much lower, but I do hope that you enjoyed this recap from the first round of the Spilima Burgo Open. I do believe that Levy has a second game later today, which I will try to recap. Now I have to go get ready for my SEC match against Jan Nepomniachtchi, which I play in about 2 hours. But at any rate, hope you guys enjoyed this. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, make sure that you smash that subscribe button below, and I'll be back with some more great recaps in the coming hours. See you guys. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.